Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick update on my experience with the Sony A1. So for those of you that have been wondering whether or not the A1 is the real deal at $6,500 US, and it's still pretty much permanently sold out, the answer is yes, it is. And in my unboxing, I talked about some of the flaws, whether it was rolling shutter or the EVF issue, essentially the sun, high brightness from the sun, basically disabling the sensor and making it so that you'd have to reboot the camera in order to start utilizing the sensor again to switch back and forth. I haven't experienced that, so that's good news. So I'm not sure if anything has changed from my model. To my knowledge, that was a widespread issue, but I haven't had it happen yet. Maybe I just haven't shot with it enough, but I've spent more than a few days shooting with this already, and the experience is amazing. It is next level, I can tell you right now. The quality of the new G Master 50mm is also amazing. So a $2,000 prime f1.2 lens here is really one of the sharpest that I've ever tested. No surprise there at $2,000. It better be. Build quality, fantastic. But the star of the show is this A1. I mean, the ergonomics, great. I think that the ability to have more finite control through the new dial implemented on the left side, top of the body, is a phenomenal addition. I've been shooting a lot of 8K video, which even though I don't have an 8K display, just like when I started with 4K, it is something where you know that you can always downsample that, and the beauty of it is that you have future proofing with headroom. And when you do watch 8K content, believe it or not, on a 4K display, you can see the difference. I remember when I first saw 8K footage back at CES 2012, it essentially gave the look and feel of watching something that had depth, almost like 3D, without, of course, glasses or your eyes hurting because of the amount of information, the saturation of detail, and I see it here. So while my experience is limited with 8K, I am blown away by the quality that this camera is able to put out. That said, with 8K, you may run into overheating. I'm in really hot conditions here where I am located, high humidity, close to 100-degree days. So that doesn't make for an easy challenge for the A1 when it comes to 8K video. However, in the 4K realm, this does everything that the A7S does. That is the A7S III. So 4K 120, 240 frames in full HD, slow motion. It is phenomenal. But the real star of the show, while the video is amazing and I like the new touchscreen interface and menu system, you get to things a lot quicker than you did with previous cameras. There's still work to be done there. And I would like to see this display flip to the side, since that has become fairly standard. Why they decided with the A1 to not implement that, I can't speak to. Some of you may have an answer. Go ahead and feel free to chime in. The autofocus is the real star of this show. I mean, the fact that we have a 50 megapixel sensor, 30 frames per second, legitimately, there have been some reviewers out there and users out there, more importantly, it's not like reviewers are the end-all be-all, right? Who have said that this really doesn't stand up to the A9 or A9 Mark II. Now, I've reviewed both of those cameras. They are fantastic. What I can tell you is this does stand up to them. So the fact that we've got an autofocus system that may arguably be better, and I don't just mean on paper, but I mean in real-world use. I've already shot this camera with my G Master 100-400 and my 200-600 G Series lens, and the results have been just as good, if not better, than with the A9 Mark II. Well, that tells you why Sony is looking at this as the top of the pyramid, and it is the A1. It's the A1 because it can be, in my opinion, your A camera for everything. We're talking about video, we're talking about still, and we're talking about both of those categories in every single capacity. So the pitch was, you don't need to have the right camera for the job, and that means 2 or 3 different bodies. You can have one. And I think Sony's pulled it off. It's not perfect. It has some issues. I mentioned the rolling shutter being an issue with the electronic, shutter as opposed to mechanical. You know, the stabilization, love the active steady shot, something that may not sound like a big difference, but you know, when you want just to record a simple video and you're not trying to make a full feature film, it's good that it's there. Should it be across all of their cameras at this point? Yes. But I'm telling you, the autofocus prowess paired with all of the amenities that Sony, I mean, they have thrown the entire kitchen sink on this, really equates to a camera that can do anything. So whether you're a sports photographer, wedding photographer, videographer, or you're just working in the studio on portraits, this thing is going to be able to do every single task you throw at it. Now, I already mentioned the shortcoming in the 8K. As amazing as the video is, we're not there yet that I can call this an 8K cinema camera. I won't go as far as saying it's a cinema camera, but it absolutely has the features. It actually has implementation from Sony Cinema World, which at $6,500, the fact that you're also getting one of, if not the best still capability on the market. Yes, it doesn't have the 60 plus megapixels that you'll find with the A7R IV, and probably the A7R V, of course, will eclipse that. Maybe not. Maybe they'll stay same spot and just give us, you know, revamped capability. It's still unbelievable because, again, 50 megapixel stills with an autofocus system that can best the A9 Mark II. I repeat, it can best it. A lot of people have thought that it can't. I'm telling you now, it absolutely can. Then also throw into it that when the EVF doesn't wig out and have the problem that people have been talking about, 240 frames, highest resolution EVF on the market. It is stunning, absolutely stunning. So I can forgive a lot of issues that people are talking about because even at $6,500, which I think is a lot of money, don't get me wrong, this is the most expensive camera Sony's ever made in terms of still, hybrid, full frame, you know, A series. There are things to be improved. And I think that's intentional and unintentional at the same time. So for example, me mentioning that the screen can't swivel out. That's something I'm not crazy about, but at this point, because it's become standard with most of Sony's cameras, that'll probably be on the next version of the A1. The fact that we've seen a revision of the A7R IV with an A model and the A7R III with an A model that have a higher resolution display, that probably is coming on the next generation. Now, by the way, with that said, I would not overlook the A1 because of the new resolution. Like people who are complaining and saying, wow, Sony screwed us because they didn't implement the latest display that they're putting now on that A7R IV and 3A refresh on the A1, that's just complete garbage because what you're paying for isn't the ability to look at a display on the back of the camera. What you are, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be there, but what I am saying is that what you're paying for is what's in this body, which is just a monster. There is nothing better on the planet right now. And that's not Kool-Aid, that's not me being a fanboy, that is the truth. I wasn't sure about it. I have to say, I want to get it. But I'm trying to control myself because it's not like my A7R IV is a slouch. My A7R IV is highly competent, but I'll tell you now, this is the sort of hybrid that I've always wished Sony would make, which is if there was a way to marry the competence and capability of the A9 series with the A7R series, you're looking at it. But who knew they would also marry the A7S into it as well. Now, of course, because we have a 50 megapixel sensor, it's not a bona fide A7S III, but the video spec sheet certainly reads like one. And for everyone who will say, yeah, but the A7S III will outperform it in low light, but this will outperform the A7S III in every other possible application, such as its autofocus, the ability to shoot 30 frames per second, and still having the ability to leverage a 50 megapixel sensor, which I would much rather have than pretend I'm shooting everything in the dark. And that's not to say there isn't a great value in the A7S III. There is. It's a phenomenal video camera. This is a phenomenal camera in every facet. And that's why it's the A1. That's why it's the most expensive camera that Sony makes right now. Because as I stated at the top, this can be your A camera in every single circumstance and situation. And so that's what makes me start to feel like that at $6,500, this isn't so expensive. Because if it can do the job, granted, it's not physically two bodies, and many of you out there would rather have two A7R4s or an A7R4 and an A7S3, and I totally get that. And that's why you still have those options. You're not forced into the A1. The A1's an option. So when do I think I'll probably jump on an A1? Hopefully I can control myself, because it's not going to change my workflow too much for personal or professional use. But that isn't to say that I don't foresee me being interested in the A1 if that price starts to drop. Now, that's not going to happen now. This thing is still sold out, and for good reason. What competes with it? Nothing. I mean, cameras try, but they don't succeed. So give it some time. Over time, historically, Sony's bodies do go down. Granted, the A9 and A9 Mark II have really held up because they are incredibly dynamic, and so is the A1. So I'm not sure we're going to see the same softness we generally do with Sony's full frame E-mount bodies. But if we do, and for some odd reason, 6 months from now, this camera is $1,000 lower than its current retail, which, because it's out of stock, is really selling for over $7,000 now if you can get your hands on it. Unfortunately, I have to send this back. Wish I didn't have to. It's going to be really hard to justify not scooping this over something like an A9 Mark II. I could not. Once upon a time, I saw the value in the A9 too. Now I don't, because if the price on this drops, this is just more camera with as much, if not more, capability, even when it comes to sports photography. And that extra resolution isn't going to hurt you with Sony's current attributes that they've rolled into their top of their DI pyramid. So really loving this camera, really loving the lens as well. This update wasn't about the lens, but can't go wrong with this thing if 50 mil is what you're looking to shoot in a G Master form. It's just bonkers. But the A1 is a winner. This is not my full review, but God knows it's not going to be far off unless I find some insane critical flaw. But I got to keep using it because, like I said, I haven't had the EVF problem yet, and that really still, to me, is the biggest issue. And by the way, regarding battery life, yes, not as good as the A7R4, but close enough that the things I was reading and hearing about battery life being terrible compared to the A7R4 simply isn't true. So, any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button, and as usual, please feel free to subscribe, and please stay safe. Later.